Today is a Wednesday, and today we remember the 11th of Nisan during the final week of Jesus' life. Jesus entered Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. On Monday, he cursed a fig tree for not bearing fruit, and then cleansed the temple and drove out the money changers and those selling animals within the temple. Yesterday, Jesus spent the entire day debating the religious leaders in the temple as they attempted to trap him in some statement that would allow them to arrest him. They did not find any fault in him and left him, never to ask him another question. Today, Jesus recovered from the previous day's debate and prepared for the days to come. The Bible doesn't record many things that Christ said today, and so it is sometimes referred to as the Day of Silence. What it does record is the actions of two other people that were with Jesus. Matthew 26, 1-5 states, "When Jesus had finished all these words, he said to the disciples, 'You know that after 2 days the Passover is coming, and the Son of Man is to be handed over for crucifixion.' Then the chief priests and the elders of the people were gathered together in the court of the high priest named Caiaphas, and they plotted together to seize Jesus by stealth and kill him. But they were saying, 'Not during the festival, otherwise a riot might occur among the people.' After the previous day's events, Jesus reminded his disciples what was coming. And it was at that time that the religious leaders began trying to find a way to capture him in secret. Continuing on, Jesus returned to the place he had been staying at in Bethany. Now when Jesus was in Bethany, at the home of Simon the leper, a woman came to him with an alabaster vial of very costly perfume, and she poured it on his head as he reclined at the table. While they were waiting for dinner, a sinful woman, who had made her living as a prostitute, came to Jesus. She had saved up some money for her old age, 300 denarii. Now 1 denarii is 1 day's worth of work. She had saved it up and bought an alabaster jar of pure nard perfume oil. She broke that vial and poured it on Jesus' head. The Gospel of John tells us her name, Mary. Matthew, Mark, and Luke don't mention her name, but John tells us that it was Mary. John 12:3 states, "Mary therefore took a pound of very costly perfume of pure nard, and anointed the feet of Jesus, and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume." This pure perfume oil was very costly. To give you some idea of what 300 denarii is, we need to look elsewhere in the Bible. John 6:7 states, "Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread is not sufficient for them, for everyone to receive a little." This is where Jesus fed the 5,000 with 5 loaves and 2 fish. If you count the women and children, it's closer to 20,000 people. So 300 denarii is about what it would take to feed 20,000 people. Think about that and let it sink in. This was Mary's life savings that she had poured over the head of Jesus. John 12:4-8 states, "But Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, who was intending to betray him, said, 'Why was this perfume not sold for 300 denarii and given to poor people?' Now he said this not because he was concerned about the poor, but because he was a thief, and as he had the money box, he used to pilfer what was put into it. Therefore Jesus said, 'Let her alone, so that she may keep it for the day of my burial. For you always had the poor with you, but you did not always have me.'" Judas was wondering what this woman was doing. She was kissing his feet and washing his hands with her hair. Her hair was all wet with the perfume because she had poured it on Jesus' head and it dripped down to his feet. She was wiping it and rubbing it into Jesus' feet. In truth, this woman was acknowledged more than Simon, who had invited Jesus. Simon had invited Jesus and lent his home to him. But from Jesus, there wasn't one word of praise for Simon. Jesus only praised Mary. She did a good deed. Jesus didn't say anything about Simon's household. He only spoke about Mary, who had broken the vial of perfume. Judas couldn't understand, and he said, "How great it would have been if we could have sold the perfume for 300 denarii and given it to the poor." But Matthew 26:11-12 records Jesus saying, "For you always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me. For when she poured this perfume on my body, she did it to prepare me for burial." In those days they would put perfume on a dead corpse when they placed them in tombs to cover the scent of rotting flesh. The entire room was filled and heavy with the scent of this perfume oil. She used her hair like a rag, and she was wiping and cleaning Jesus' feet. To Judas this was unacceptable. He was thinking that if he could have sold the perfume, he could have pocketed some of the money. He was the treasurer, and he used to pilfer the money little by little. But now he couldn't do that. And that's why he scolded the woman, but Jesus told him to leave her alone. Remember, John recorded in John 12:6 that he said this not because he was concerned about the poor, but because he was a thief and as he had the money box, he used to pilfer what was put into it. Jesus must have called Judas out on being a thief, because there's no other way that John would have known to tell or write about it. This must have seriously angered and embarrassed Judas when Jesus called him out. We know it did because immediately afterward he ran out to meet the religious leaders, asking them, "How much will you give me to turn Jesus over to you?" Jesus exposed Judas as a thief, and this is the reason why he went out to betray Jesus. Matthew 26:14 through 16 states, "Then one of the 12, named Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, 'What are you willing to give me to betray him to you?' And they weighed out 30 pieces of silver to him. From then on, he began looking for a good opportunity to betray Jesus." Do you think that Jesus was at rest in Bethany knowing all of this? He must have been really anxious and nervous. I'm sure that he couldn't focus or concentrate on anything because of this. If you knew that a contract had been put on your life, could you enjoy a nice quiet meal? I don't think you could. You probably wouldn't even be able to enjoy the taste of the food. You'd be scared and nervous. Your thoughts would all be distracted, especially if you knew that it was one of your so-called friends that had put the contract out on you. People who don't know about this think that Jesus was resting and relaxing today. Was he really able to relax like someone who didn't know what was happening? Today is called the day of silence because Jesus didn't talk much. Even talkative people, when they get troubled in their hearts, stop talking. They don't have anything to say. Jesus publicized the fact that Judas was a thief, and because of that, he went out to hand Jesus over to those seeking to kill him. John 6:70 states, "Jesus answered them, 'Did I myself not choose you, the 12? And yet one of you is a devil.'" Jesus said that he chose the disciples, but one of them was a devil. Jesus is saying that Judas is Satan. He knew that Judas would betray him and sell him. Does the sovereign plan of salvation become interrupted or destroyed because of one person like Judas? God used Judas for his own purpose. Even when we can't believe, we can be used for God's purpose. Proverbs 16:4 states, "The Lord has made everything for its own purpose, even the wicked for the day of evil." This occurred while Jesus was in Bethany. Do you know what the name Bethany means? It means the house of suffering. It's a house where your heart isn't at peace. That's what it means. It's a house of pain. Jesus came into the house of Bethany in order to turn it into a house of joy and delight. But Judas, who shared his food and ate with him at the same table, was plotting to betray him. Knowing all this, do you think that Jesus' heart was at peace? What kind of rest could he have had? Later on, Jesus confessed that his heart was in agony, and it was sorrowful to the point of death. On the outside, Jesus was silent, but in his heart there was heaviness and great turmoil. This must have been so frustrating for Jesus. Judas was the treasurer of the group. He had the money at all times, and would go out to the market to buy food and provisions for the group. When Judas left, the other disciples thought Judas was going to buy food. None of the 11 disciples knew what Judas was doing. Only Jesus knew that Judas went off to see the religious leaders. Remember that Jesus was God and was omniscient. While he was praying at Bethany, he saw his enemies moving around. He spent this day in prayer, and he said about Mary, "She has prepared me for my burial." Mark 14:8 states, "She has done what she could. She has anointed my body beforehand for the burial." Mary's work, her perfume, had already prepared Jesus. When Jesus was buried, the scent of the perfume from 2 days earlier filled the tomb. Think about it. The perfume was pure. It was pure oil. And when it was poured out on Jesus, the oil penetrated his hair and his skin. That smell wouldn't go away for a very long time. Even as they were beating and whipping Jesus later, the smell of that perfume was still with him. As he was hanging on the cross and the wind was blowing across his body, I'm sure that those that were present could still smell the scent of that pure perfume oil. Now how amazing is that? Did Mary know all this when she broke the entire bottle over Jesus' body? Was she there when Jesus died on the cross? She wasn't there physically, but the scent of her sacrifice filled the air. How wonderful is that? Jesus said of her that truly, truly I say to you, wherever the gospel is preached in the world, what this woman has done will be spoken of in memory of her. And here we are 2,000 years later still talking about Mary and her perfume. In contrast, Judas didn't recognize Jesus as the Creator. He mocked him and looked down on him. Judas's end when he died was very dark. Judas's conscience was bothered after he betrayed Jesus, and he went back to the high priest to return the money. However, they looked at him and said, "Why are you bringing this to us? This has nothing to do with us." They didn't take the money back. Instead, they bought the field of blood for the vagabonds. Judas took a rope and tied it to hang himself from a tree, but even the rope didn't accept him. The rope broke, and Judas fell to the ground. The Bible tells us that his entrails burst out from his body when he hit the ground. Today, while Jesus was praying, he saw all of this. He wanted his beloved disciple to be successful and to go to heaven, but instead he watched him fail. How much did it hurt Jesus? There was no one who understood and fathomed what was in his heart at the time. So today, on the 4th day of Passion Week, let's make a determination to believe in and serve Jesus well from now on. Thank you for watching, everyone. God bless.